Recorded July 15th, 2024. Good afternoon, Rod. Good afternoon, Ray. What it be like? What it is? What it ain't?
Is this the middle of the year already? July 15th?
It is the middle of the year.
Oh my
It
goodness.
is absolutely the middle of the year. Well, actually, we're on the other side of the middle of the year. So
That's right.
yeah, it's Blue
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It is storming here, by the way.
Oh, great. It's storming in upstate New York, and time is an illusion. So I have no sense of geospatial relationships or time. So it's always a surprise to me. I live in a world.
Those go hand in hand. So yeah.
Yeah.
And it's storming in Atlanta. And you're right. Time is a construct of man to help explain natural phenomena.
Actually, time is a KQL
query. Is that what it is?
I was working on, of course, Copilot for Security Day and trying to improve the responses to generate KQL queries, because anyone that's worked with Copilot for Security knows that the natural language to KQL thing kind of has some gaps. So I figured out a way to fix it, by the way, today.
To fix the gaps or fix what? You just arbitrarily fixed it, right?
Well, instead of trying to fix the plugin itself, fix your prompts. So I wrote this blog post today about creating kind of like if you know KQL and you sort of know the schema and the structure and the certain tables, even if they're custom tables, if you give it the table name and you give it the date range and you give it what you want and how you want it to display, if you create like a nice little uniform template and submit that as a prompt, it will return better queries.
It has a reference document or a reference framework.
It is. And tomorrow, I'll show everybody how to create a prompt book instead of just using that template.
Yeah. What series is this that you're doing this? What webinars?
It's just on my blog.
Okay.
I just goof off most of the time, so that's it.
Yeah. I when you post that, I won't see it too, because my prompt skills are abysmal. I keep treating it. I fall into the old habit of treating prompt creation as though I'm searching something on a browser. I'm using a search engine. That's a recipe for disaster, right? I did do something pretty cool with Copilot. But anyway, we'll go to Ray first. Ray, what have you been breaking?
My spirit. Let's see. I had my 5-year-old last week, and that was phenomenal. I was working on my draft proposal for B-Sides NYC, co-authoring an initiative with Mike Zambotti, is a guest on our show previously. So really cool stuff. Having some home ownership
challenges,
adventures. And it's been super fun. So it's amazing. I think my eye is twitching involuntarily, and that's just how you know that you're doing great. You're doing great, sweetie. So that's
or that your window is open, or that your window's open and the gnats are getting in. Or something.
The gnats? What are you talking? Oh, because they're swore. Am I like?
Well, you said you're.
Am I dead? Like, why are
you? No.
What?
I mean, she's just
this is Rod's new book.
The walking Ray.
Yeah, this is Rod's new series. He's like, and now I will present to you.
Thanks for that. That's a nice segue. I am working on another book topic that is completely different than the other two. So.
Okay, and what can you give us a sneak peek?
It's a zombie book.
So, Rod, really?
But there's a twist. Anyway.
What is the twist?
It's always something. It's a zombie who was raised from the dead by someone who wrote a KQL query that rebooted their brain.
That'd be great. Yeah. Oh, man. KQL queries throughout. You could say it's like a story mode where you could save the person if you just write the correct KQL query.
Or you prevent the undead from rising by writing the more you screw it up, the more zombies come, right? That's a good game.
You have to consult the Necronomicon. Is that what it is?
The Necronomicon.
Yeah, the Army of the Dead. Okay.
Hey,
wow, we're way off again. We're way off again. Go ahead.
So on tech news, so we don't keep our guests in the room eating up all the snacks and beer. Did you guys see? Google, sold some stock and it's going to try to buy Wiz for $23 billion.
Is that going to happen?
That's going to happen. I think what they're not so much concerned about is that you got to get the board to take a look at this, and are you paying much more than the valuation of the company? Wiz is a solid security technology, and that would be a lot, 20 billion, I think, was the initial asking. Some blog, offer, and I think Wiz wanted 23 billion. But think about that. That would solidify a huge gap that they have, because I was using some of their cloud control inside GCP.
Yeah,
It is wanting. It is absolutely lacking, right? And I'm like, what is this? They got something called Log Explorer or something like this, and a few other things for their cloud control So they don't have true multi-cloud control. So if you got Wiz in there, now you become a contender. And so that was another interesting piece of news. What was the other? Oh yeah, did you guys see what AT&T massive hack,
yes,
and they're throwing Snowflake up under the bus?
I am so happy to have never been an AT&T customer. I can honestly say I've never been an AT&T customer for anything. I'm so super happy about that.
I happen to be a cellular customer and a wireless customer, so I immediately changed my passwords across that. I cut my TV off a long time ago. I don't watch enough TV.
Yeah.
But that has huge amounts of fallout, because initially the way it was presented, that this was a singular attack against AT&T, but it was resulting of the data lake that they're using, the vendor. And so I've been reading a couple other threat profile websites where they're trying to see the stuff actively used in a while, and also warning people, especially those who are very susceptible to phishing scams and cellular telephone scams, that you can't trust just because someone knows all your information.
Right.
Just because they can call you with a high degree of certainty and say, this is your email address, public record rather. This is your phone number, public record. This is your social security number. To our listeners that are security minded, we know that your social security number is public record. Your address is public record. So if anybody can call you and spout that off, that doesn't mean anything. It just means they had too much time on their hands. And you have to have some form of, hey, I think we got a squatter that's just joined the show. Who is this gentleman on the show?
I'm going to make him prominent, top left. Who is that? Oh, that's Henrik. Henrik. Oh, no.
Henrik's back. Get Henrik. Yeah. So,
Brody. What the?
Brody's
Look
live.
at you. Wow.
How
You
are
look like
you?
a dad. You look like a dad.
To the
That's
two
awesome.
new listeners of
Number
the
one
show.
dad joke, Brody. You're on the spot.
Why does Snoop Dogg carry an umbrella? For drizzle.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Drizzle. Look at that one.
Okay.
He's
I have to
officially a
write that one
dad.
down.
There you go. But we were talking about the Snowflake hack that's affecting AT&T, and probably some others are going to come out, and all the information from these attacks on, AT&T accounts, when people can call in with legitimate information about your social security number, your name, your mailing address, your email address. You have to rely on multi-factor. And the second thing is, on my accounts, there is a secondary password. So you could do the same thing that AT&T does to you. When I call in, they say, sir, can you give us your secondary password? And I have to give it to them, even though I'm multi-factor. You have to do that when these companies are calling that are hackers and say, hey, we're here, we noticed this, and we have your information, we need you to verify. Then you should ask them, what is my secondary password? Well, we don't keep secondary passwords, sir. We can't do that. Then I will call AT&T directly and click and go that route. That's it. Hey, one quick thing before we get started in the show. We don't want to keep our person there. If you're on the show and I sent you a Fortinet firewall to use in your lab, let me know. I need to borrow it back for something I want to test.
Yeah, he needs to change the password or put a second password on it.
No, I don't need it. I need to borrow it for something. So I forget. I know I didn't send it to Trevor. I sent it to someone, one of the friends of the show. So if you remember, if you can send it back or let me know that you have it, I'll send you a label. I need to do something in my lab, and unfortunately, I need two of them. This is one of the few times I only have one firewall. I need to do something really quick. It's something
For our listeners, what's your email address, mailing address, and credit card number?
password,
Yeah.
secondary password, social security number, all that stuff.
Favorite animal.
It's all public. It's all public.
It's all public.
I think
All right.
Are we ready?
No, we're not ready. Brody,
Yes.
other than out and increasing the Canadian population, how have you been?
Good. Very good. Sorry I'm late. No, it's been great. Everything's great. Dad life's awesome. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to get my webcam set. I got to set my whole office.
You look a little. You still have the new parent. Like everything is good.
Everything's great. Everything's under control. No problems. And
no sudden movement.
Yeah.
Unsteady, but that's
yeah,
okay.
no, everything.
We love you, Brody.
I just don't like my camera angles. I'm very upset. I got a new office and I need to build it because I kind of stopped building it when the baby came. And so it's a junk pile behind me. So I have to like configure this whole thing and figure out where my camera goes. That's why I'm distracted. I'm like, God, all these angles suck. I gotta like figure this out. I gotta get a bigger camera. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, how are you three?
We're well.
Yeah, good.
Some of us are. Speak for yourself. I'm hanging in there. You know, I'm surrounded still by boxes. Recently moved. So you're fine, Brody. You're more than fine. Everything is good, and we've missed you, and folks have missed you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I think this is our first show.
It is.
Other than the first where I was like a guest, and so here we are. This is good stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah. You keeping these guys in line, Ray, or what?
They don't need any of that. Through my back.
Did they get your Star Trek puns?
What was that?
Did they get your Star Trek puns? Are they appreciating your Star Trek puns, like what you have in your title today, which I love?
I think they don't want to enable me, to be honest,
Okay.
Brody. They clock it and they're like, we're not going. We're just gonna leave. We're gonna leave that right there, Ray Mary.
It's like poking a hornet's nest. You just never know, right?
You never know. Well, we have a guest sitting in the green room.
Do.
And we want to go ahead and get that person on. So we'd like to welcome Michael Melone. What's up, Michael?
Hey, everybody. How y'all doing?
Doing all right, man. Life is fair. Life is very fair. How are you doing?
Doing good. Trying to beat the heat down here in the Florida area. Congratulations, Brody, by the way, on being a new father.
Thank you, Michael.
You look very well rested, much more well rested than I remember being back in the day.
The camera angle's hiding the bags under my eyes, but I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Doing that. Michael, what did you do in life that ended up as punishment by being on this show? How did you end up on this show, man?
So I've known Ray for a bit. She mentioned that you guys had. I heard about y'all's show, and it sounded like a really great opportunity to kind of meet up with everybody live and talk a little about where it came from and everything, and what y'all are up to, the latest trends and such.
Well, Mike is the man. Mike, internally, right, and external, you were on Dart. You were the guy people call if they have a problem, and you were the guy that they don't want calling them to let them know they have a problem they don't know about. You are just the dude, and you have your own YouTube channel. You have taught classes at the university level. You are a world-renowned presenter. You do it all. You have you're part of Defender Experts. Obviously, you have a team and you have wonderful leadership, and the folks that you mentor and kind of nurture professionally, they are incredible, and it's a reflection of your talents and your skills. And I'm excited for the world to get to know you more. So please tell us exactly who you are and your origin story, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've been in cyber for a bit over 2 decades now. It depends on how you define security. I used to work in ECM, DCM, and such back when I was in the military, so it's sort of cybersecurity related, but not quite the cyber we know today. But that was back in 2000 to 2004. Did a number of years in government contracting, came to Microsoft in 2010, so I've been here for about 14 years now. And actually, my background is in systems administration. I always had this passion for cybersecurity, right? I got my CISSP back when I was a sysadmin, did all that kind of stuff, but we didn't really have the same type of capabilities and the same type of visibility that we do today. So targeted attack and all that kind of fun stuff wasn't really quite a thing. Over time, though, actually, I was working at my customer as a platform's premier field engineer, which is kind of like a Windows Server consultant, if you will. The Dart team, the original Dart team, Team One, came to do the very first proactive assessment at that customer. And while they were there, I spent some time helping intercept some network traffic and do all kinds of cybersecurity type related stuff with them. And they were like, "Hey, you want to join the incident response team?" Sure, why not? Let's do it. So my background is actually I'm more of a sysadmin than I am a cyber guy from a history perspective. But yeah, I joined Dart back late 2012. I was the first person on team.
Wow.
And for those who aren't familiar with Dart or the detection and response team, it's gone through a couple different names. Back then, it was called MCS Cyber. There's a whole bunch of different history behind that. But effectively, what we specialized in is hands-on keyboard attacks. Basically, we have a determined human adversary, APT type situation. This is back before Bitcoin and targeted ransomware was the thing. So I spent about 7.5 years working with them, helping building out their tech, building out their team. Did a whole bunch of consulting all over the world for a number of years. And then, as tends to happen when you spend too much time on the road, it was time for me to slow down a little bit. So I spent a couple of years on the Defender customer experience team, which is a product group aligned, basically helping the product team understand the needs of the customers in exchange for helping customers onboard and operationalize their stuff. And did that for a couple of years and kind of missed that pointy end of the spear. So I came over to the Defender experts team a little bit before it started up. And I work on the Defender Experts XDR team. So I'm one of the analysts on the team who does basically manage XDR services. So kind of keeping an eye on customer networks, making sure there's nothing bad going on, remediating, providing recommendations, all kinds of fun stuff like that.
Very cool. Did you do time with Drew Nichols on the Dart team?
I was one of the guys who helped who referred Drew Nichols. We had him one of our customers, and so he was the first one. So the way one of the things that how Dart operates is they've got a capability of this kind of like an auto start of every endpoint in the enterprise, and then we sort of diff it in all different ways. We have signature detections and statistics and such. And this was I want to say probably 2014, 2015. And I'm at the customer, and Drew is actually there as a MCS consultant, a Microsoft Consulting Services consultant for that customer for other reasons. And he's sitting in the room, and he's the first guy who came up and says, "Hey, you mind if I take that data and see if we can run machine learning on it?" I'm like, that's the kind of mindset that we need, is somebody who's willing to take a different approach, because all the Azure ML stuff was it was pretty new back at that point in time. So yeah, I spent a number of years on the road with Drew. Good guy.
Yeah, I have the pleasure of working with him. He's been on the show a couple of times, and he is a good guy and very, very sharp.
Super sharp.
Yep. And I saw your name. I haven't had opportunity to work with you while I was on the Defender Experts team, but I seen your name come across some emails and things. And we've had some folks on, I think, that may have mentioned your name. We've had BB Rogers on, and we've had Brian Hooper on. I don't think we were able to grab Chris Riggs in time. His schedule kept being a little bit wonky to get him on, but good. So let me ask you a quick question. So I've known Dart as long as I know Microsoft, what the services were. What is it called now? You ask 3 people, you get 5 answers.
Does it have anything to do with the logo on your shirt?
Yeah, it's wrong side. There you go. Mirrored. Yeah. So Dart. I think internally they still refer to it as Dart. I'm trying to think of the actual customer-facing name now. To be honest with you, I can't. They changed it up recently, but it's also split. There's also a team that works internally and a team that works customer-facing now. I actually, to be honest with you, it's been a couple of years, and I don't actually know the exact public-facing name for them at the immediate moment.
Well, it's like MCAS or Intra. Everybody still calls it either Azure.
Yeah, they call it that, because I asked the question because I totally forgot myself. I remember the name. Is it like Microsoft Incident Response, like MER or something like that? I can't remember the name.
Oh, that was even before, I believe.
Yeah, that was we were originally Microsoft Services Cyber. Then we were the Global Incident Response and Recovery Team. We were GER, and then we were a whole bunch of different names.
GER.
Yeah.
I think we simplified
customers
it Microsoft incident response team. And then in parentheses, it's always formally Dart because everybody internally and externally, Dart sounds pretty like badass, right? So it's always in parentheses there. So I think
well, they had to change the GUR team because the customers complained. They thought everybody was just angry with them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
This is
So-
GUR. Yeah.
So you're an analyst and a threat hunter, and there've been numerous Defender Experts videos, day in the life of a SOC analyst. Obviously, we talked about some of your peers and our colleagues on the show, and Ray is doing an outstanding fireside chat series where I got to meet even more people, and Satchin and I are doing a series of videos that are going to be released soon about it. But like I said, you ask 3 people, you get 5 answers. What do you do? Because the last analyst, they said one thing. I was like, let's see if there's a consistency in what they do.
Yeah, so my particular role is probably a little bit different than a lot of the other analysts. I don't work as many cases, being honest, as I used to. I'm usually brought in on some of the really ugly, nasty ones. A lot of what I'm doing today is working on sort of like developing, we'll call it, to simplify, developing queries and techniques and reporting and investigative capabilities for the team to use. Also helping lead some of our internal product design, if you will, that's designed, that's the framework that we use to perform investigations. So I do, but I mean, typically, yeah, it's our team as a whole is performing incident investigation. So when we have an alert that meets the threshold for investigation, our team will dig into it. We'll try to figure out where it came from, what happened, and then provide either a number of recommendations for the customer to take, or if the customer grants us permissions, we can do things like disable accounts, isolate boxes. We have a couple of different actions we can take on their behalf. And to be honest, that's a big piece of our service, because that is what helps us ensure that we can give a customer who doesn't have necessarily staffing for 24/7 SOC, as a SOC team, we can give them a 24/7 SOC team and make sure that they're kind of protected so that their SOC team can kind of relax a little bit, take their weekends every once in a while, all that kind of fun stuff. Maybe take a holiday every now and again.
Maybe.
And so we don't confuse our listeners, I know we've transitioned. We're talking about what Dart is, which is responsive to a confirmed incident, but we really are talking about you on the Defender Experts as a incident responder as well as a threat hunter. It sounds like you do a lot of threat hunting in addition to writing detections and doing that. I think the fireside chat I did for Ray was around effective logging. And then I was going through a SANS course, the 508. And one of the things that was the scariest was WMI attacks, living off the land attacks. And my eyebrows, if I had any, went all the way up. Like, oh my God, how do you hold serve? Do you see any of those in the wild? Those WMI attacks and those consumer and event attacks?
WMI-based persistence is definitely a thing. We see all kinds of random stuff, and we see it from different vectors, right? And I'll be honest, the scarier ones for me most of the time are the adversaries who do a great job acting like sysadmins, because it's kind of easy when you see this funny looking PowerShell script launch from WMI. I'm like, that doesn't look right? You've got somebody who's taking the web dev and they're doing a run dill, calling the web dev DLL, saying download cookie, and then it's some strange URL. I'm like, that doesn't look right. That's pretty easy to pick out. But when somebody is using perfectly legitimate tools and otherwise, legitimate admin credentials, it's very difficult sometimes to discern an adversary from a legitimate admin. Those are the ones that, honestly, the ones that keep me up at night more than anything else. WMI, though, we definitely see some WMI. A lot of QR phishing. So the product just deployed a really cool capability for MDO to be able to pull the links out of these QR codes, which is really helpful now. Because one of the challenges you have with a QR code is you can't rewrite it with safe links, so you can't get in front of the click. You also typically go from a mobile device or something like that when you go into a QR code. So you don't really have an opportunity to stop it. And if somebody puts in their credentials, all you're going to see is the logon most of the time.
Yeah.
So these new capabilities really help us out quite a bit.
So QR codes sound like they're passed by. Did I say it right? Drive-by attacks. Like you scan it, and that's the payload delivery on that. That would be cool. Just go all to the restaurants and just stick them on their tables. Order here.
Well, the
all the restaurants. Go
Yeah,
put
the
it.
challenge we have is phishing with them because people will make it as just an image attachment. And before the QR capabilities we have in Defender for Office, you just see a picture was sent. So it's a fish as legitimate as any other, unfortunately, in that scenario.
Yeah, they interviewed the guy that helped create the QR code, or maybe the team, and he honestly said they never thought it would be used as an attack vector. They were just trying to simplify URL stuff the same way with tiny URLs and that stuff like that. That's pretty cool. And you're right, sysadmins, that's the ones that are hard to find because, I mean, people, they may be good at locking out 3389 RDP external to internal, but they're allowing it to run rapid internal, right? And then use it, instead of using PowerShell for, PS session or invoke, that kills you, right? So what's the scariest thing that you've had to work on the last month?
In the last month.
And we went full names and details, please.
I was just say I don't know if I can really go into too many details about this, especially since I'm working
just don't
with
say
customers.
AT&T.
High level.
Yeah, I mean, we've so luckily because we work in security operations, the majority of what we're dealing with is mostly like phishing attacks, a lot of suspicious logins and things along those lines. They're not if we're doing our job, most of the time that's the type of stuff you run into. We have had a couple scenarios where customers are, we'll say, pwned before they join our service, and then we get the after effects of it. We start seeing suspicious post-breach activity. That's always an interesting scenario to deal with. But yeah, it's as we are an ops team, most of what we're dealing with is proactive stuff if we're doing our job right and the customer has their stuff set up properly. Every once in a while, though, we do get something interesting.
You made a good point about them having their stuff set up correctly for a presumed breach, because one of the co-creator of this podcast and a friend of the show, Frank, said that that's the biggest thing. The response team spends 2 days just trying to get the right login in place, right?
That was one of the so when I was on Dart, one of the biggest challenges I had was people use when we started seeing attacks on ADFS and such, because we started seeing more cloud service stuff, right? This is or maybe people would do ADFS authentication for their, at the time, Azure Active Directory identities and such. So the problem we always ran into was, well, the ADFS box lives on-prem. It's probably behind some sort of a load balancer. There's a NAT. It might be behind some geo load balancing capability or geo routing capability. Well, there's another network address transition that's going to happen. Now, if an adversary comes from their IP address, they hit that load balancer, and then they go through one or two other things that change the address. By the time you get to the ADFS box, if the authentication, where the actual authentication is taking place, they're using some IP address that's changed 2 or 3 times. Now, if you want to chase that back to the actual original source, you got to have logs from every single one of those things in every single translation. And what you run into a lot of times is customers have maybe good visibility in their web logs and such on where authentication is happening, but they don't have a SIM pulling in all the information in the middle, so you can actually stitch that whole story together and figure out where it came from. It's kind of an interesting situation because people always think about, I need to log where the event's happening, but it's also everything in the middle that has a potential of switching things up on you.
Yeah.
So
Well said.
So you say you've been at Microsoft since what? Did you say for 2014? Is that right?
2010.
2010. So what is changed from a security perspective, or at least your approach or the things that you deal with in that number of years? Because I assume you went from mostly on-prem and now you're starting to deal with cloud-based attacks. I'd like to kind of sort of, I guess, understand what you see as some of those changes are, but do you still focus, or is the focus still mostly on-prem, or are there more cloud stuff?
So yeah, that's a great question. There's it's changed a lot. So when I started back in Microsoft back in the day, I was a sysadmin. I came from a defense background. A lot of the security approach was what I call target hardening, right? Apply a secure image to the box, put a firewall around it, and everything's all well and good, right? Nice and simple. The reality, though, is when we started, when Mimikatz and other pass the hash tools started becoming more commonplace, it changed the game significantly for on-prem. So it used to be you would look for a suspicious network connection, we're looking persistence point, and like at that point in time, like that's your scope of investigation. The game was changed when you had pass the hash come into play, because pass the hash created 2 pivot points. Now it's not just the endpoint, it's the identity. And you can go from endpoint to identity to endpoint to identity to endpoint to identity. And that's that whole thing. Mark Simos has tons of diagrams and talks he's done around, the tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, the original model we had. So, and it was all about trying to keep the adversaries at the low tier of credentials, right? We want to keep them in user space. And so a lot of it was identifying that. Credential hygiene was the number one thing, and it's still a big thing. Strong authentication is important, but it's also important to note, like, for example, if you use smart card logon for your enterprise, there's a bit you can set in Active Directory for the smart card required for interactive login, and people are like, well, I'm good, I've got this bit set, except that actually makes your until I'm hash for your password never change after that point until you unflip the bit and flip it again. So from a pass the hash perspective, you're actually worse off, because if you log out with that smart card and they get your password hash, it's not going to expire like a password is going to expire. So it was really interesting trying to get us shifted to that world. So there's a ton of stuff around Active Directory, understanding all the obscure places in Active Directory you could be delegated admin permissions, like the root of the domain, the admin SD holder, all that kind of fun stuff. And then in the Windows stuff, in the user rights assignments, usually where I played, because most people look at like the administrators group, right? That's the easy one. Sure, who's in the admins group? That's how you use an admin. That's the easy way. We used to also have to dig into the user rights assignments, though, to figure out who actually has admin, because a lot of times what's going to happen is sysadmins or developers or whatnot are going to be configuring group policies to make, and they can't make something work, so they start throwing principals into certain strange configurations. All of a sudden, this user who's a user actually has the ability to debug the operating system. I've also seen a scenario where it was a weird one, because if you look at the box, it was like everybody who touched it was an admin. And what we found out from when we took a look at it is they actually put the logon types into the local admins groups, not the users, but like network logon, remote desktop logon, interactive logon, all of those made it. So that was the big thing for many, many, many years. When we started stitching together cloud, obviously things started to change. We started getting into conditional access, and that kind of became a thing. The morph towards cloud definitely changed the game a lot. It showed where we had gaps in visibility, and it makes things a little bit more difficult, because before, at least, you had like you had a central point you can go after. When you have the cloud, you got to have that telemetry from all different sources, and then grok and analyze it. It's a totally different kind of skill set, to be honest with you. Looking at registry keys, process, auto storage, like process launches, all that kind of stuff is completely different from looking at like cloud access security broker logs and those types of things, right? Your concept of the idea of exposing your authentication to the world is a totally different concept than auth only happening over Kerberos or SMB inside of your little network. And then it's pretty easy to map out where the auth's coming from. So the idea of geo, doing geo anomaly detection, looking at user agent string anomalies. We got into when we started getting into managed devices with Intune. There's all these different pivot points you have now, and all these different things you have to kind of put together to put the picture together. The good news is once you find it, it's usually a bit easier to track somebody, because there's some consistency most of the time. But it's a totally different thing. And that all started, when we started connecting Active Directory with Azure Active Directory, and we're moving more and more towards a cloud-centric world. And the good news is it does give us a better, I would say, control. And since things are in the cloud and security was pretty tight when the cloud became a thing, you have better visibility in a lot of cases, like out of the gate. So there's bennies to it, but there's definitely a lot of new challenges. Now people are using overprivileged OAuth applications. That didn't exist, 5 years ago or something like that. I want to say off the top of my head. And it's a totally different concept.
So do you think, I guess, the skill set has kind of stayed the same? So if you've been doing this for a long time, your experience is key, because you automatically know how to kind of track these things and identify the IOCs, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But has the tools improved enough that you need less of a skill set these days? Because I think sometimes people are under the assumption that, hey, if I get all of these Microsoft tools, I don't need those skills anymore. Right? Maybe it's not Microsoft tools. Maybe it's, some other competitive tool. I don't need that skill set anymore. Are we even there at that juncture?
No. So here's the thing. Well, so one of the challenges, you bring up a good point, the skill set. And the skill set, we keep looking at things and we make them broader, right? Usually whenever a new technology comes into play, or like cloud, and now we've got generative AI, and that's a whole new thing, right? We always look at it as like, oh my God, there's a new domain, right? There's a whole new thing. And I like to go the other way around. And I like to try and take those things that are complex and simplify them, right? And the acronym that I put together back when we put together the compromise recovery framework was the ABCs of incident response. So you always have authentication. There's always an identity concept to no matter what the thing is, right? There's always a backdoor mechanism, a mechanism to control the thing that you're interacting with, whether that be a human that you're tricking into clicking on a link, whether that being a network interface, a piece of malware that's running on a web shell. There's always a mechanism of control. There's always a communication channel, which is a path that the adversary uses to get to that control point. And there may or may not be data depending on the current stage of the attack and what actually just happened. You have to look for the CIA triad around data. So that aspect, so what we got really good at is we have tons of data and tons of detections. We can figure out these anomalies better. We do have a lot of auto remediation capabilities, and that's evolving, especially with machine learning and all these great new technologies that are coming out. It's like that side's getting better. But the problem is the adversaries are, as new platforms, new capabilities come out, there's new persistence points, new control points, new ways of doing authentication appear. And that we're always going to be catching up because technology is going to be coming out and evolving the landscape. And then we're going to be trying to figure out, okay, how do I map this to the cyber domain? What does the detection on this new thing look like? And many times you don't even know what it's going to look like until somebody innovates and creates it. So there's always going to be that, because you're going to have something suspicious that's going to pop up. And as a result, you're going to have to pivot and, adapt that ABCs of incident response to that.
Well, from that skill set perspective, though, I think the way I look at it, that skill set is still super important, because it doesn't matter what tool you use, you still have to take kind of the same approach, right? You still have to have the data, you still have to know how to monitor, you still have to know what to look for and stuff like that. Which kind of leads me to my next question. How do you stay up to date? You've gone from this whole story at Microsoft from 2010 to today and all of those different changes. And we know that the security targets are always changing. How do you stay up to date? How would you tell our audience some of the best resources that you utilize?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of pieces to that. There's a lot of great innovation that goes into the products. So staying on top of what product releases for whatever Microsoft or otherwise, whatever your security stack is, know what the new capabilities are, because that's going to be your signal. Knowing your data, they kind of go together in a way. But like one of the big things that I loved about the Defender stack is advanced hunting and the whole KQL, the ability to hunt yourself, right? Like that's a big piece, and knowing what you know, or knowing what your enterprise looks like. The other side of the house is kind of knowing what's coming, what's in the threat landscape. Most of the various analysts and myself, we follow a lot of blogs, a lot of cyber news. I watch the Hacker News is one of my personal favorite ones. There's a whole bunch of different sources that are out there. Also, if you have any proprietary threat intelligence sources and such, that helps out as well. Just to kind of see what's currently out there. But your network is typically your best bet. And not the network as in routing packets, but the network as in the people
flow logs. Yeah, that's the best.
Exactly. That's everybody loves a good packet capture. Yeah. But no, it's a lot of the stuff that we pick up. I mean, nobody's going to be an expert in everything. Nobody is omniscient to the super point where they can see every single thing that's going on. You're going to have different people who specialize in different things and pay attention to different threads or observe different things. That network is super helpful, and at least getting tipped off to a new technique And then from that, going on your own research.
Yeah. I always wonder about that because I know, my process and the things that I monitor, but you can't monitor everything. Just like you said, you can't know everything. And you just have to resign yourself to that fact. But I feel like I'm hogging the conversation. Ray
Oh,
she's like
no.
chomping the bit to ask a question. So I'm
I
passing the
get
time.
Mike day in, day out, but I am
Yeah.
so pleased that the community gets to see him in action, and your questions were spot on. Mike, pop quiz. What is it sufficient to just consume the information? It seems like you've been hinting at this, but you need to get hands on, right? You need to, it's not just enough to be an armchair philosopher. Like, you've personally written books, which have been very helpful for me, trying to bolster my technical chops, right? So tell us more about your full process from a holistic point of view. And there's another question before Rod jumps in. Why are you so passionate about sharing your knowledge with folks?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard. So part of the reasons why, especially analysts, part of the reason why we have decent visibility is because we see stuff every day, constantly coming in. And as Defender XDR, we see it from multiple customers. So, and that's actually one of the bennies also from having been on Dart is you get kind of inundated with all these terrible scenarios that customers find themselves in, and that's a lot of it. That's where you learn a whole lot of stuff from, and eventually you get to the point where you start making frameworks out of it, and that's kind of the goal is once you can make that framework out of it, and then you can apply that framework elsewhere. The biggest thing, I mean, if somebody's getting into cyber or trying to ramp up, is when you see something, try to recreate it, or just if you think there's something possible, right? I mean, test it out and see if you can do it in a lab. Obviously, not in your corporate system. I'll save my comments around people who have seen it, customers who've tested out payloads in their infrastructure. But
Actually, that's me. That's me. So.
Yeah. So I mean, but the biggest thing is you got to actually do it, because the thing is it's one thing to read about it in a book, right? You can read it about it in a book and it's like, oh, cool, I just learned this new technique to do blah 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 blah. When you see it in the wild, it's not going to look like what you saw in the book. It's going to look a little different. And the only way you're going to really kind of grab that, I think, personal opinion, is if you play with it and you in a lab and you see what it looks like in different scenarios. Like, oh, can I do this? And that actually, so the funny thing is that kind of branches a little bit into, like, when we were building a compromise recovery, I mean, there was no textbook way to do a compromise recovery, right? I mean, because every breach is different. They all have different aspects to them. And you have to get creative. And the only way you can get creative is understanding what the full gamut of tools you have available to you are. How do you intercept this process from launching? What are different credential recovery strategies? How do you come up with obscure ways to intercept command and control channel communication? And that, funny enough, goes all the way back down to the basic platform stuff, routing, DNS, OS fundamentals, all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, gut feel on that one is the biggest thing is playing with it and learning.
Well, and I appreciate that, because that's the type of learner I am too. Somebody will tell me something, there's no way that I'm going to retain it unless I actually do it myself. Right. Early in my career, I worked for a computer rental company, like very first job I had, and we would deliver computers. Some people might remember a person named Mark Manassi, good friend of mine. Brody won't remember because he's too young. Mark Manassi, he's a great guy. Look him up. You'll find him probably even on Wikipedia. He ran a computer training company, and we delivered computers to his training courses, his training classes. We delivered computers. He called us up and queued us up one side down the other because we left a virus. Remember the stoned virus back in the day on his computers. Long story short, we didn't do it. We actually ended up finding out that his secretary had it on her computer in downtown Cincinnati, and she's the one that distributed the virus. However, I wanted to know more about that. So I started collecting viruses on diskettes, and I would bring them back to the shop, and I would infect everything and try to figure out how to remove those viruses.
Nice.
Totally get it. Yeah. And that's actually, so funny enough, that's a great way to learn. If you do so in a safe environment, and don't do this with a determined human adversary sample. And no, Mike Malone did not tell you to go download malware and install it on your computer. Please don't go that route, right? In reality, if you want to learn what that stuff looks like, drop Defender for Endpoint on it, turn the AV response capabilities off so you can actually let the thing run, and just run it and see what the heck comes up. Go in advanced hunting, query what happened on the box. Or if you're a dead box type person, go ahead and snap the image, snap the VHDX, and take a look at it. See what changed.
So I caught myself. I jumped in, but Ray had another question. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, so Mike, you are so generous with your knowledge and support for just across the board with customers, with your colleagues, with your team. Like, why? What drives you to actually share your knowledge, your skill set, your expertise with folks?
So I was fortunate when I got into cybersecurity. As I mentioned, so I was a sysadmin, right? I did pretty good as a sysadmin back in the day, Active Directory guy, But I never really had exposure to the cyber world until Dart came along. When Dart came along, I had a whole bunch of people. You had Jeremy Croy, Christopher Ard, you had later on Christopher Kirk. We had John Asante, IB Terry, all these guys I used to work with on Dart, and they ramped me up on it, right? I mean, I'm over here, and it was funny because, and this kind of goes back to that whole, you got to have a little bit of everybody to create a good team. Because, I mean, here I am, sysadmin guy, okay, so I don't understand the whole reverse engineering thing. I get the concept, but don't give me windbag. I don't know what I'm doing, right? Learned a ton from Jeremy Croy and his background in anti-malware, right? IB Terry is just a total forensics ninja back in the day, and they shared with me. And in turn, I was able to return stuff back to them. I was able to, a lot of their early infrastructure stuff was automated by me back in the day. Like, how do we scale when platform as a service became a thing, right? Which is basically VMs in a cloud, right? We had to come up with a way to automate deployment of our database servers for this analysis. Or we had a little tool that did sort of like it was kind of like Cuckoo in a way. You can think of it as an internal tool, sort of like that though. But it had to work on a VHD, right? We had a whole, we were like, okay, well, this is a cool capability, but it takes so darn long. So wrote some automation to help build a whole bunch of VMs and seed them all with the implants we wanted to analyze, and kick off the analyzer and pull the results back. So we didn't have to do all that stuff manually. You just throw stuff into a folder. So it's sort of like, I kind of got a passion for sharing this stuff because stuff was shared with me. That's the reason why I'm here. I wasn't, magically.
It materialized this way. Your composition of all of the contributions from other people, and so you're compelled to pay it forward, and you show up that way. So kudos to you.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's also just because it's such a fun field, to be honest with you. It's not static in any way, shape, or form.
I feel out of date.
And that's another thing to appreciate about that. But Brody, did you have a question? Sorry.
Sorry, I said I feel out of date, and I've been gone 2 months. So yeah, it's a fast moving.
Yeah, it's really difficult, really difficult to keep up. However, just like you said, it is an interesting job. A lot of people look at cybersecurity and they think, oh my goodness, that's where I want to go. That's my next role. That's where I want to pivot. But there's the other side of the coin, which I don't think we talk about that often, is the demanding piece of it. Because you talk about it and you have this passion and the passion for sharing, but at the same time, how do you deal with the drama? Do you literally have to take 6 weeks off between every project, or how does that work? How do you get that mental vacation?
I was on Dart for 7.5 years. Marriott was the third hotel chain that I stayed in. I was originally a Hyatt guy. Then I was a Hilton guy for a while until Starwood acquisition happened. So I spent probably the last half to 2/3 of my time on that 7.5 years in Marriott, and I still accrued over 600 nights worth of stays, which is 2 years worth of your life you live in hotels. So it's very time consuming, and especially in the world of target attack incident response, people aren't like, well, I'm going to have an incident next week. Can you have your IR team come next week when we have this incident? No, you get a phone call and say, oh my God, I got a bunch of blinking cursors. My stuff doesn't boot up and I've got this terrible image floating around my corporation. How do we figure out what's going on? So the problem with that is you get inundated very quickly. You go from customer to customer to customer, from incident to incident to incident. The stuff we hear about in the news is only a small portion of what's actually happening in the industry. And it's unfortunate. It's like, and it used to be back in the day, it was covert intellectual property theft. Sometimes you get like wiper type stuff, So yeah, and then when you get there, it's 12 to 18-hour days, probably, right? Because you're taking a customer from nothing back to having functional network, while at the same time trying to find where the bad guy is and how they got in there. Because more than likely, if it's an IR and it's a good, and it was like a wiper or ransom attack, you may not have the logs you need depending on how the customer's set up. Right. So yeah, it's definitely a demanding field, that's for sure.
Well, and the unfortunate thing is a lot of customers don't have that disaster recovery process in place for these things. So a lot of times you have to kind of, I guess, do the due diligence and do the communicating with maybe law enforcement or board members. And yeah, that can be really super mentally draining.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, but at the same time, though, going back to being an interesting field, right? Yeah. I always kind of looked at it like I'm playing chess with an adversary that I never meet, because every time I go there, all right, they're already in, maybe not checkmate, but they've got their pieces in a good position for them. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been called in the first place. And it's kind of like a combination of spy versus spy, where you have OPSEC. You got to make sure that how do you operate without the adversary picking it up, and vice versa. But it's always kind of interesting, because you're going to make a move and you're going off of your gut, like what I think I know is in place. And then you'll learn very quickly if you're right or you're wrong. A tactic change, maybe immediate impact can immediately tell you that you were wrong about your assumptions. So it was always, while stressful, that's also kind of what makes it fun a lot of times, is that whole balancing act of how do we play this game and make sure we win.
So what's next for you, Mike? Are you going to be writing new books? Going to compete with Rod for like most prolific author from Microsoft? Are you teaching again? Are more YouTube videos? What do we got going?
I need to find more time. That's the biggest challenge. I would love to write a book. It's been a time thing, unfortunately. I got my first couple. The first one was just basically, I mentioned I was a sysadmin and went to Dart. Think Like a Hacker, where the first one was actually just sort of like a idea that I had, where the things that I learned going from one position to the next. Designing secure systems is way more theoretical in nature. It's about generalizing what an attack looks like, to the point where you can unify human process, physical security, and cybersecurity using the same model. And how do you trace between that, right? But I think at the moment, like I said, I definitely thought about doing some stuff with ops, but it's time is always the issue right now. So hopefully I'm planning on doing a few more webcasts. I've been trying to put together some content for some stuff. It's just, as I'm sure, as you all know well, it is a time consuming thing. Absolutely.
I know somebody here has been asking you many times over to contribute your content. So yeah, I'm sure we'll see more of you soon.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time today, Michael. Brody, did you have anything to say? I know we wanted to kind of ease you back into real life, but
I kind of rolled in a little late because baby was crying, and then I was just trying to like get my bearings straight. So okay, I'll throw out a question. Michael, if there was, okay, you talk about skills, obviously, learning by doing. Is there a tool or technique that you and your team have been using lately that has been kind of a game changer that you feel you want to speak about?
So we're a little bit different than the normal world in that we have a lot of data available to us in Custo. We don't have a whole lot of tooling outside the Defender tooling to actually do the investigation. So from a specific tooling perspective, I would say we're kind of living off land in many ways with what's in the Defender suite. But Custo is our weapon for the most part, and we've done a lot of work to try and figure out. So one of the challenges you have is, how do you tell a story of what happened? Like, what are the various ways an analyst looks into an entity, right? We've got this whole concept of you have recent alerts, you've got threat intelligence, you've got timelining, blast radius, which is effectively entity relationship type stuff. And like, how do we codify that? That's been the big challenge, right? We've put together, the way we've approached it is we've actually built a whole bunch of Custo functions. So we actually have a Azure Data Explorer cluster with their own database, and a whole bunch of really crazy looking Custo functions that helps us kind of tell the story from all these different angles in one single contiguous view. So it doesn't have to be, because the problem you run into a lot of times, especially if you're dealing with different tooling and such, is you've got different schemas, right? And I'm sure from a customer perspective, you're going to have like your firewalls. It might be what's that standard in the log? Common security CSF, common security log form, I think it's called. Like, yep. It may be standardized to that point, but anybody who's worked with that, even in Sentinel, knows that you have to go a level further, because one thing says source and destination, one says local remote, one's there's different ways you do that. So developing programmatic ways to assemble that information so it all meets down to a single schema for each workload type. Like, timelining has a very distinct way we look at it. For timelining, which is probably where we spend the majority of our time, I would say, I estimate, the big challenge is how do I stop horizontal and vertical scrolling? How can I string concatenate contextually the most important pieces of a specific event in a single column, so the analyst doesn't have to fly left and right to figure out what in the heck happened in this row? Same thing with vertically. We're working with ways that we can dynamically highlight specific rows based on certain entities that the analyst is tracking in that context, so that you don't have to go vertically all over the place. Like, that's probably one of the bigger areas we've done a lot of innovation in. And so I would say the tooling that we've been putting together is our own stuff mostly. We're assembling a lot of ways to work with data and improve it from an analysis perspective.
That's very interesting.
You got my interest piqued. You gave me an idea, something to do.
Co-authors, I see it. I see a collab in the future.
Well, we don't normally utilize Custo functions for Copilot for security. We're generally just creating the query and then running a subset. But if we could do it in Custo functions instead, we could minimize the. Anyway, sorry.
We have a question.
We do. You do?
I said we, not the royal we. The we. There.
We as in me.
No. I believe Andy has put in the chat. Yes. Does Michael have 3 top tips to aim for the life of an IT pro covering security?
So IT pro covering security, or somebody converting into security. So if you're, I'll see if I can cover both. Let me see if I can do it.
Yeah.
So if you're an IT pro and you're getting into cyber, right? Identity is really the thing. A lot of it's identity and OS fundamentals is all of our stuff. But if you're an IT pro, you probably work a lot with the OS fundamentals. But only some people really get into identity. Typically, the people who are like authentication admins, that kind of stuff. If you manage your, Enter ID, Okta, on-premise AD, whatever that might be, right? Understanding how authentication works is a big piece, especially getting into it from a cloud perspective. From an IT pro coverage, so the second thing I would say. So I would say there's a goal and a technique here, right? So the goal would be make everything look as similar or the same as possible across everything you have. And the reason that I'll give you, I can't name the customer, but there was a customer who did proactive assessments regularly with us. And they had they were a large organization who had an amazingly consistent network, which means the second we start going out there and we find some signal, I immediately know if it's anomalous. The problem you run into is especially in incident response work is there's inherent anomalies everywhere. And then, so I would say work to standardize to the greatest degree possible. And you're going to find that highest degree of standardization, hopefully, in your authentication infrastructure. If you have something mess around auth, then you got a problem, right? The second tier would be, the Mark Simos tier, tier 1, right? We'll say your server infrastructure, if you will, right? And you at least make it consistent among itself. So by consistent, I mean no random programs. It should be the same auto starts, as much the same versions. It should talk to the same destinations. If it doesn't, then here's a funny tip. Even before I was in cybersecurity, I was working in my favorite tool to use when I was a consultant was we had a Securify. Is it Securify? It was an anomaly-based IDS. I used it for systems administration. I used to find out how my machines were misconfigured by looking at the anomaly-based IDS and saying, hey, why is this thing sending DNS requests off to Narnia, right? Like, it was a great tool for systems administration. So baselining can take you a long way. And then knowing what that baseline looks like is handy, right? If you know what normal looks like you're going to have a heck of a lot better time trying to find those anomalies and strange things. Third one, I would say IT Pro covering security. I mean, there's conditional access and those type of things are really, really, really impactful. I would say if you're covering security in there, as much as possible, ensure that your authentication is obviously strong authentication, MFA or something along those lines, right? But it's coming from a trustworthy source. Because a lot of times, and this is a challenging thing to implement, because everybody wants to use their personal device to access corporate stuff and all the rest of that stuff, right? If you can find a way as much as possible to rein that in and have authentication using strong auth from trusted devices, it's going to be much easier for you to identify and potentially prevent any cloud authentication funniness. It's much easier. It's a challenge to implement, but once it's in place, it's a really effective defensive strategy.
Nice.
I have to tell you, I just interject real quick. I love that second tip, because the way I read that question is, I'm an IT pro. Security it's required, but it's like my secondary role. I don't have enough. What are the three things? And that second one, I think that is probably the best tip ever. Make everything as similar and as consistent as possible. So when you know something is wrong, it's actually wrong from a security perspective. So I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, trying to get people to buy into that's the hardest part. A large organization, but yeah, obviously you don't be chasing ghosts all the time.
Well, there's a lot of old equipment. A lot of organizations can't move forward all at the same time. There's a lot of technical debt. It's really hard to maintain that. But if you could maintain that, oh my goodness, you could do IT pro and security, the sysadmin and security at the same time.
And you're going to have that. There's going to be inherent anomalies no matter what. There's always going to be 1 offs, 2 offs, 10 offs, 50 offs inside of any environment, right? Yeah. The way I would handle that is, I don't know if anybody's a fan of the old NSA Rainbow series and the old research and such. There's the Bell LaPadula and the BIBA model, right? The BIBA integrity model was one. So basically, treat those systems as low integrity systems. Cordon them off as much as possible. If they're going to be inherently anomalous. Where is that? Your workstations, right? What's the best way to cordon them off? Put them on BYOD type infrastructure instead of your intranet. Heck, make everybody connect remotely. I'm sitting at home connected to work, right? Anybody who gets into my box is only going to get what you might be able to get. I don't think I have anything on the net that's even interesting in my house, other than maybe my Ring camera.
Not a challenge to anyone, just to make sure. We're not this is not a CTF with my
We'll wait. Yep. We're going to wait real quick. Anyone listening, go ahead.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's the thing is if you, the higher the integrity of the system category, basically the higher you can guarantee consistency and security, try and keep the things that are below that bar cordoned off as much as possible from those things.
Yeah. That's great. we are very near we're past the top of the hour, but I think we got started a little late. And Edward, I think we're going to have to start a GoFundMe to pay for his. He must be using AT&T. I don't know. That's the only thing I can guess, that he's not here. He's using AT&T, and he got hacked
He
somehow.
shared that the weather. He was
Right. Yeah.
doing something, and the weather.
That's weather's an excuse.
User-friendly.
Weather's an excuse. Yeah. But,
I accept the fact that probably a number of different groups probably have a lot of my personal information somewhere. I just want to know why they need so many copies of it. That's what I can't figure out right now.
Yeah. Well, if it's government, you know why. They just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Michael, thank you so much. Ray, thank you for inviting Michael. This has been super awesome. I think we got a lot of great information. Again, going back to that second bullet point, that made my show right there. Seriously.
That's good, Rod.
I'm not even joking.
I know Shining Star. Ed knows Shining Stars. I know Shining. You bring the constellation together. Come on. This is good stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's great to have Brody back.
I definitely appreciate you all having me on. It's been fantastic.
We appreciate you coming on and taking the time to do that. It's awesome. And of course, you got to come on when we got Brody back. So Brody said that he was late tonight, but he's like 6 weeks late. We're like, when's Brody going to show up? I keep looking at my watch.
Surprise! But seriously, thanks, Michael. That was engaging. We appreciate that. I'm gonna check out your books. I need to get back in the game. Maybe some reading will help.
So, Michael, I think I have your blog. I posted that a little bit earlier on the show. Your YouTube channel. If there's any other resources that you have that people can take advantage of, send me those links, and I'll make sure we get those in the show notes. Because again, it's one thing to be super smart, super intelligent. It's another thing to have all of that and then be a sharer, because I think honestly that's the most important part. So I truly appreciate that.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Keep it up, Michael. Thank you.
All right. Next week. Oh my goodness. For those listening in or watching, well, I'm coming on next week.
No.
We're actually having the authors from the Microsoft Press Definitive Guide to KQL on next week, and we are going to give away 2 copies of the book next week on the show.
Goodness.
We haven't figured out how we're going to do it yet, but it's going to happen. So everybody needs to tune in next Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time, and you have to be tuned in live to get the chance to win the book. And it's not really a winning thing. It's not like it's a race or anything. It's just it's not like it's the first one here.
Literally like a raffle. Like, how are you going to select the winner? You have to have some kind of raffle.
So I floated some ideas. Edward shot them down. I think
classic.
Maybe he has some ideas. We'll just figure it out. We'll figure it out.
It's gonna be corrupt. It's gonna be a total corrupt decision. Just so
yeah. It's gonna be last minute. I'll probably just keep them myself.
I know it's going to be user not Rod. It's like, oh, Rod, you're so amazing. Can I please have both of those copies?
Speaking of Michael, you probably know Matthew Zorch from Australia. That he was on the Dark Team. He's been on the show a few times. He was one of the co-authors of this book. So
awesome.
Yeah,
there you go. You can cross-sign each other's books.
We'll see Matt next week as well. All right. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us this week. We'll talk next week. Hopefully we can invite Brody back. I'm sure Ray will be here, and maybe Edward will have paid his cellular bill. All right.
Great closing, Rod. Good job. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.